All right, go ahead.
Oh, what? I'm starting, am I? Well, that's the wrong way to start, I suppose, for a non-duality group, but there's no wrong way. There's no way to. We just use the word I, of course. There was some thought that was coming.
You were talking about this is just interaction.
Yeah, we just started to say hello to each other, and this is just like interaction. And this whole thing seems like not learning anything new. We're not, there's nothing to be learned. It's more about, although everything is just aliveness, everything is just completeness, it doesn't feel like it's negating that or making it into nothing happening, because there is experience happening. There's this is all vibrating in aliveness, and it's just the fascination is with being interacting with itself. The fascination is, sorry, somebody's coming in.
Yeah.
So it's about, it seems to be about not learning anything here at all. There's actually no body, no single self, no separated entity learning anything here. But something is happening where this interactive completeness is looking at all of the things that aren't real. That's the opposite. It's about you go away from a meeting like this with less self, with less idea, with less knowing, with less control. and that sort of sinks into openness. So I completely this perspective of vibrant, infinitely complex life that's going on here and expressing here, sees that there is nothing actually really happening according to the separate mind of the separate self, the way that thinks about things. But there seems to be a vibrant, complex vibration and expression in that is all of this, all of it interacting. So there's sort of been phases where it's been about nothing, and then it's about something, and then and that's all good for pointing towards the separate self. Look at that. What is that? And then can be an appreciation of life of itself, because it's so beautifully creative, so complex, impossible for the human mind to understand the complexity of what's going on. So there's like whatever we're talking about here is coming through biology, and that biology is part of the experience. So I kind of look at it as a fascinating, vibrant expression that we're all part of. And it's beautiful to be in that story, as long as you're not identified as as the story. Yeah.
Answer the phone.
Sorry.
Faith, we're trying to conduct important business here.
It's also important.
To the me, to the me, it's I mean, my God, it is all about me, right? I mean, you practically really can't have a thought without a me involved. Because who would it be referring, who's interested in these thoughts? I mean, if you look, you can't find anybody. I mean, there's sort of a subtlety that the me just cannot, it doesn't even land on the me's radar. But you've heard Nkosi and myself and others say, all is this, right? All is this. But if that's really seeing, then there's no one here that could possibly get that, because all is this. So even the one thinking that they're getting that doesn't exist, because only this exists.
There's something in that sort of has been ruminating in the past week, and it's not that there's nothing that's wrong at all. There's just I had a conversation with someone a while ago, a friend, and I was saying, and they weren't really interested in this, or didn't get anything that's being discussed here. So I sort of tried to approach it a different way, and I was saying, just imagine, just for a game, just for a thought experiment, just imagine, just what would happen if this is, just imagine this virtual reality I'm about to describe. Just imagine that all that's happening here, just imagine if it was just vibrating energy. Just imagine that for a starting point, just for one thing. And some of it's actually decided what it's going to be and come out of potential, and the rest of it's also in potential. So we've got this field of vibrating energy that's realized into sort of one expression, and we've also got an infinite number of variables that hasn't even come out of potentiality. Just imagine that's the field to start with. That's the fullness. And imagine if in that, sometimes it comes together and collapses out of potentiality into something, an object that is supposedly happening in this space. And this space is all the same thing anyway. Nothing, there is no separation in any of this space. Just imagine that molecule, that atom, comes into being for a creative expression in itself. And imagine if some of those come together and form other things, solid matter, rocks, whatever. And then imagine if some of the other stuff comes together and forms vegetation, nature, plant life. And in that, somehow there's a coding, hugely, infinitely, unknowably intelligent. There's a coding that teaches itself how it can actually keep growing and change in itself as an expression in itself. But it's still all just this vibrating matter to start with, all right? And imagine if some of those formed into animals, insects and animals, and it was so complexly intelligent that it's worked out how an animal can survive and procreate, and the digestive system and the heart and the blood pumping and all of that. And it also seems to have some emotion in that is, a mother dog or animal can recognize its offspring, and there seems to be an emotional attachment. There's a gentleness. There seems to be love of recognition in that expression, but it's still just an expression, all vibrating. Or this one's just happening this way with an added complexity of being able to do those things. And imagine if there's another one that pops up randomly in this infinitely creative expression inside itself, all doing this. It's all the same thing, no separation. It's all just energy doing it, a whirlpool over here, and it comes out as human being, which develops as part of that expression, not like a tree just learning how to grow, but part of that expression is it starts having an infinite number of complex thoughts, memories, and stores itself to keep the biological organism alive and surviving and procreating, doing what it's doing and prospering. And imagine if that develops a thought that sees its own thoughts. It's still just all vibrating energy, a field of just, potentiality collapsing and all of this, and it's all this happening. Imagine if that expression is what we call human being. And then part of that beautifully complex expression, the human being, the thoughts turn back in on themselves and say, as well as all of that, this expression can actually twist that into making a story about being a separate self. I'm a separate bit of this whole thing that's all joined. It's all one thing. And the self is born. And then the self goes about the rest of this competing with the other separate bits and has language that also consolidates that separation. That object over there is separate from this me, life, being. And none of it's owned, none of it's separate, none of it's really anything apart from that vibrating energy that is being whirlpooled and expressed as all these different things. And all of that's just going on. And there's no doer of any of that. It's life. You could call it life. You could call it more complex than life. And we just call it life or source or God or field or fullness or completeness or whatever you want to call it. And all of that's just happening. And in that creative expression, there's this perfectly, infinitely complex, interesting thing that's happening, which is the experience of being a separate self, which is also just like a tree learning to grow. It's part of it. It's not wrong. It's not bad. It doesn't need to get rid of. And all we're doing here is exploring this is exploring itself in these interactions to see what it does. It's fascinating. It's just interesting to watch the creativity of these things being expressed and manifested. And all of it is just that. And none of it's wrong. None of it's right. We don't need to even get rid of the separate self. It can be if it wants to, because this is just this doing separate selfing. Why not? It's as valid as anything else. Except at some point, it seems in this sort of thing happening here, that this is looking into itself for just the same as having the experience as being separate self. It's looking into itself and going, oh, and look what I do also. I do separate selfing, and I do looking at separate selfing. And all of this is a game. It's a play. It's just a play in this completely beautiful, alive creativeness, this complex intelligence that is being expressed, all one thing, no separation, no dividing between anything. And these whirlpools of interaction and expression happen as human beings. And these human beings have a whirlpool of interesting creative investigation that goes, am I really here? Is any of it really here? Maybe. There seems to be something happening here. There's a discussion, but it's not what the separate self perceives it to be. That's the main point of this whole non-duality exploration, is it's not what the separate self thinks it to be. But if it wants to think it that, it's as valid as anything else, because it's the same thing anyway. It's just another expression. That's just something that's been ruminating.
Thank you. I enjoyed that, John, very, very much. And just was wondering what your friend thought at the end of all of that.
Didn't understand any of it. Got lost about a bit after the imagine if it's all vibrating stuff. That was about as far as it went. It's like, okay. It doesn't matter because it's the same anyway. It's just that, and it's that creative expression of them interpreting and doing that is exactly as valid as anything else. It's not, it's all as valid as the next thing. So the complete ignorance is what we call ignorance from a human perspective of you should get non-duality is completely as valid an expression, a creative interactive happening, because it's the same thing doing that, you know.
Exactly.
It's all a story. Anything that's going here is just a story anyway. It's just another one of those whirlpools going, and I can do this too. See, I'm doing this. Why not? The main thing is that, you know, the starting point, I suppose there's no gradations, but the starting point would be there's no stages, but something that seems to be a major object in thought is that the separate self actually exists, that I actually own this bit of life, I run it. Someone's up there driving it. That's the funniest, most obvious thing that's not there, but it's okay because it's as valid as anything else. It's just when this is all looking into itself, but the creative expression of just playing and just expressing and being creative and intelligent and blossoming and evolving and forming and unforming and changing and just all of this going on all the time, and this is just part of that, and that's just part of that. That is the same there, and we say here and there, it's the same space even, because there isn't any space apart from thought. There's no time apart from thought. It's all, if you took thinking out of it and then you tried to think about where this is and that is here and there, if you took thought out of it, of course it's just always the same. It's just, if you took the thought of what space is or here and there out of it, it would just be complete. And then the idea of space and time seems to spread out with thought from no particular place. So it's just thought adds space. Thought adds segregation. Thought adds the linear time. Thought adds all of these things. Without, if you could think about taking the thoughts away, which as a human being you can't. That's what I was talking about. You somehow going into the unknown, which the thinking separate self calls confusion or lack of security, going into that, this delineation that happens in thought no longer is as delineated, if you know what I mean. That's the only way I could say that. But I mean, and so the pointers that are all saying you don't exist, there's nothing here, and there's nothing happen are completely true and correct. But also, I'm getting a bit lost here, but the first port is the separate self actually what the human being thinks it is? No. And then there's also, and it all doesn't need to be got rid of, that nothing is happening. Nothing is happening like the separate self thinks it is happening, because the separate self itself is just an illusory object created in thought. So if that sort of seems to go, oh, okay, that's not really what's happening. Doesn't matter, but it's not really what's happening. It's just another layer of thoughts. If that seems to go away, then all the other stuff doesn't actually need to go away or not be, or be nothing or nothing happening. It's all vibrantly expressing and doing whatever it does, this fullness seems to be expressing something in all of this. Whether some people say matter's not real, or it is real, or it's not, you know, it's not attached to, it's all vibrating stuff anyway. Doesn't matter. But see, like this expression, this thing here, John, that I call John, now is actually really just fascinated in loving the vibrance and creativity that seems to be expressing here. So this doesn't actually want it to go into nothing. This wants to go, oh, this is absolutely amazing. This vibrant expression is amazing. It's beautiful. It's beautiful in its complexity, in its unknown infinite complexity that this human brain won't ever comprehend. And what seems to be happening, so there seems to be, it's not layers, but it seems to be as that separate self drops away, there can be more appreciation for the vibrance of form that's patterning and changing and doing and not doing. And it's all just here. There's this beautiful fascination of itself looking into that. Whew, look, this is just, and it's all doing itself for itself for no particular reason. Just, it's just aliveness everywhere, doing what it's doing. So this part of it doesn't want that to be not experienced. It actually is enjoying the experience of observing the creativity. And yet it is always textured and perceived through a biological contraction of itself. It doesn't make sense. It won't make sense. It doesn't need to make sense, and it doesn't need to go away. There's like, what I was going to say is it seems to be with this, you know, you hear a lot of talk about thought stops, should be no thought. But this biological expression, this creative form that's speaking now, when it's sort of freed up from all of those identifications and contractions a little bit more, I say a little bit more because I'm trying to be gentle, but it's when that's just seen differently, then thoughts seem to be arising still the same, just not the same identified thoughts, but the thoughts are like, there's noticed here that the thoughts are coming and they're peaceful and blossoming and creative and more openly creative and more, they're just not the thoughts of, oh, I wish it wasn't like this. Oh, I've got to resist that. Oh, you know, there's not those sort of thoughts. There just seems to be lots of thoughts. And this is observing itself also doing beautifully creative thoughts without the same counterbalance of pain and suffering that comes with contraction and identification of a separate self. So the thoughts are just the same vibrance. So it's not nothing happening. There's lots happening, but they're just doing that, changing, doing that, changing, doing that. Beautiful. Oh, wow, that's interesting. And that's not even like an observer observing the thoughts. It's just there's thoughts. Wow, that's creative. That's interesting. So there can be like daydreaming, but it's not daydreaming from a perspective of a separate self entity. It's daydreaming from an individuated perspective of the same of itself. And those creative thoughts are absolute. There's just another appreciation, another interaction with the beauty, the creative expression that's going on. That is the same thing, doing that. And then it's got the add-on of a separate self thinking it's doing all of that, which contracts it and sort of keeps it out of an interactive flow that it is. And that is doing that for its own experience as well. So there's nothing wrong with that either. So that's something. And yet none of what I've just said as John is actually a finite reality. It's just another thing that's being explored and expressed and interacted with and being textured and filtered out of this body with its millions of variables and experiences that it's had since birth and DNA and whatever. It's always textured. It's always textured through that experience, which seems to be mind and brain and memory and as a biological organism. So none of it is actually pure flow, but it's closer than what it used to be. And that's still in the story of time, which is still not what it is. Just, there's no other way that can be expressed apart from making stories and fairy tales about it here. And the fairy tales are only interacting with itself so that the fairy tales that aren't real are seen as that. And then that part is no longer. And the rest of the creative expression is just playing in a different way. That's all. Each way is valid as the other. And no one needs to get any of this anyway. Firstly, there's no one to get it. Secondly, it doesn't matter. It actually doesn't matter at all. Nothing will change. Except everything will always change. Just words. Can't do it without words, unfortunately. Even that's a story.
Hi, Nkosi.
Hello, hello, Michael. Hello, everyone.
Hello, Mike.
Hello,
and
Nkosi.
Nkosi.
So I was wondering if you might comment, Nkosi. All is this leaves no one to get this.
Yeah, because already there is no one to get anything. So if all is this, then who wants to get this? So it can only be this, trying to get this. So I can say this is just playing with its own self, because there's nobody here. There's just this. There's nobody here. There's nobody listening. There's no one talking. There's no one doing anything. Talking is happening. Listening is happening. Linking is happening. Laughing is happening. It's just what's happening. And it's happening for no one but this, because there's only this. So no matter what is said here, there's no escape. There is no one who is outside of this who can say something that is outside of this, because there is no outside of this. There's just this everywhere. There's no one in Africa. There's no one in America. And there's no America. There's no Africa. There's just this. This cannot be known because there's no one here. So what seems to be an individual looking for this is just a thought appearing in this, and it's also this. There is no individual here. There's never been any individual. There are no separate entities. There's no separation. There's wholeness. There's everything. So no one can ever disappear because no one has ever appeared in the first place. So what seems to be a me is thought-based, or is a thought construct. So there's no me already. It's just disappearing as a me, looking for this. As John has said, they're just thoughts appearing, and they're beautiful. Whatever appears, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. It's more like a play, but no one is watching because there isn't anyone. This is immediate. This is here. This is right here. And it's not here for anyone. It's not here for you. Just here for itself. Well, I can even say it's not even here. It's just this. Well, here and everywhere are just words appearing in this. Any question arising, it's just this asking a question. There's no individual. So everything is beautiful. It's amazing. And everything is always new. There's just what's appearing and disappearing. And what seems to be a think of thoughts is also a thought appearing in this. There's no real you who's thinking thoughts. They're just thoughts appearing and disappearing. So thoughts, they don't belong to anyone. Characters, all characters don't belong to anyone because there isn't anyone here. Over to you, Michael.
You know, for me, it's just it's always been a pull towards simplicity. And all of this leaves no one to get this. So even the one that's trying to get this is already this. I was laughing earlier when Nkosi was talking because it's like it doesn't recognize itself. And I was thinking like if my finger came up like a ghost and I was like, oh, a ghost. And then I pulled away, oh, it's my finger. It was me the whole time. I was scaring myself. I was playing a trick on myself. So really, that's basically what's going on. You know, John, you touched on something when you were talking that really is seen here as well, and that is the loss of specialness that the me clings to and realizing that it's all special.
And it's all not special as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, yeah, of course, it's that whole self that judges and wants itself to be more special so that it can continue and strengthen its sort of identity and story. So specialness is really strong in spiritual seeking circles. Specialness is like right up there. And I'm trying to recall what that felt like. It's like everything that's going on as it is doesn't need to be any other way. So even the needing to be special, even the thought of self not being what it really is, you know, the delusion, the illusion, whatever we want to judge it as, can't be anything but perfect because it's the same thing, just expressing in that way.
Yeah.
It's just,
but you can see, John, that's where the logic, the mind will never get this because
No,
that
it
doesn't
can't.
make sense.
And the mind not getting it is perfect.
Yeah.
As part of this expression, as part of this interaction, as part of this play. That's also like a leaf learning how to grow. It's just part of it. So, you know, these explorations can easily judge that as being suboptimal. You know, that's not ideal because it's not, you know, it's not truly what we in essence are. It is because that's also what we are. That thought is also what this is.
Right.
It's all just playing.
Well, John, now you're hitting on what Nkosi, you guys, when Nkosi would say, you can't go wrong. You can't go wrong with this. That's what he was saying. It's because it's all this. So it's impossible.
It is expressing this way. So even the word valid is a judgment. It is expressing this way, but I'm going to use it. So it's as valid as anything else. It's, even though for the mind, the separate self is trying to find a way through this to the end. It says, well, that's not good enough. That's different. That's not ideal. They've got to get rid of that bit to get back to nothingness. But it's all the same thing, just expressing differently. It is the same thing. It's just the path, is the journey, is the thought, the unideal thing that seems to be happening according to the judgment is the same thing. It's just the same thing, just vibrating a bit differently. expressing and forming a bit differently, whether it matter or form or thought or whatever, doesn't matter. It's all just the same thing doing that, playing like that. Now it's playing like this, and it's playing like that, looking at itself and interacting with it, and it's playing like that, judging that interaction with itself. It's just all the same thing, just in flux and play and beautiful creative spontaneity. That's just it. And if that's enough for the mind, the human mind, well, it's not, because as I keep saying, there's reflection coming from this experience, which is biologically grown into this and has had a multitude of experiences in brain memory and all of that. When this opens its mouth, it has a filtration through that. So I'm very aware that whatever comes out of here is some sort of purity of itself, because it starts to see itself, but it's got, there's no illusion that that filtration, that texturing isn't happening at the same time. And that's okay too. But I know, as this John character that doesn't exist, we can say that it doesn't exist, or it does exist, or it's happening, or it's an experience, or it's an expression, it's an interaction, whatever you want to call the character, still is filtering something coming out here, but it's not, but it's always going to come out filtered through the life experiences of this John body and DNA and who knows what else unknowable that's interacting with that. So there's no illusion. There's sort of been an investigation here that I've got to get rid of John, but actually now it's like that is just the expression that's happening, and it's part of that, and it doesn't need to be gotten rid of, but it may not resonate with another part of itself over there. So these words may not resonate with another instance over there at all.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter, but there'll be certain instances of this. Nkosi resonates with a lot of people. This may not resonate, but that's just what it is anyway. Doesn't matter. It'll try. It seems to be wanting to try, but it's, you know, it's not unencumbered with experience of being a human body. And that seems to have been another layer of this opening or sinking into itself, which it already is, but there seems to have been a time when that would be judged as imperfect. You know, there's the character's not doing it as well or as whole or as spiritual or enlightened or whatever that needed to be better. And now that's actually not, there's no one that needs to be better. Whatever imperfections, that if it's judged as a human separate mind, whatever imperfections are inherent in this expressing, it's just the same thing doing that through this interactive experience of life that's coming out here. Doesn't matter. It can't be different now, but it seems to be, it's a wrong way to say it, but it seems to be more accepting that the imperfections don't matter. You know, it's just interacting for some reason to play and interact and explore itself. That's all.
Yeah, there was a big part of the non-duality community that really, the me, there's there's really no other way to say it, was kind of the bad guy. And then about it's been about, well, I don't know, 4.5, 5 months now. And I see this guy named Nkosi, and he commented on one of my posts, and he wrote, "Whether there's a me or not a me doesn't matter to this." And something in me just went, yes.
What I've been enjoying lately is that Nkosi spoke about that the thoughts are late. They turn up late. I don't know how you say it, Nkosi, but it's been really helpful to me. I've been observing myself when I get panicky, and just thinking, yeah, the words that I put to the action that I've just done, they come late. The action comes first, and yeah, the thoughts are late, and somehow that frees me up from believing the thoughts. It allows me to sort of just be with the actions. I suppose it takes away the judgment of what's causing judgment and causing my pain through, or suffering through judgment. And I guess when I realize the thoughts they tag along on the end, but they're not really part of what's happening. So that's been very helpful. Thank you. And Nkosi, tell me again, how do you say that about the thoughts coming late? How do you express that? I'm not expressing it very well.
You know, as I always say, that there is only this. There is only this. You know, so this just doesn't go anywhere. It's always here. So a thought that says, I'm not getting it. And the one that appears to say, oh, I've got it. So I said that, they are late in the sense that this is always here. But what seems to be thoughts is just this as well. There's no separation also.
Mm.
Yeah. So so this is right here. And the thought says, I can't get it. So it's just a thought. It doesn't mean anything. It is not special. Doesn't mean anything. And the one that says I've got it, it's the same as the one that says I don't get it. They're just thoughts appearing, and they don't mean anything. And there's nothing wrong with that as well, because it's just this expressing instead. So yeah. So there's already no you there. And whatever question arises, it's just this asking the question. And right now, I'm not talking to anyone because there isn't anyone here. And those words were never said by you because there's no you there already. You've never done anything. There's just this.
So in a way, it's kind of subtle, but it's like the me needs something to happen. The me is waiting for something to happen. You can feel it. And this isn't. Any last comments or questions this evening before we close out? Well, I don't know about you guys, but I enjoyed myself very much. Thank you to everybody for coming. John, thank you for all your lovely sharings. Beautiful. Nkosi, of course. Thank you, brother. Everybody, appreciate all of you so much. Faith and Alan, thank you so much for the donation. Greatly appreciated. And I'll get this up on YouTube in the next 24 hours. Good night, everybody.
Good night,
Bye.
everybody.
Good night.